Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy neglected by all one. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video, and also go support the Wordlet for writing that awesome fanfic. Let's start this video. He forgot it was tomorrow. He couldn't believe he'd really forgotten, almost forgotten. For 12 years he'd reacted to the date accordingly, saying a quick prayer to the skies, staying silent and as solemn as he ever got for a short time to show he respected the life and death, and usually he gave a small offering. Often the whole week prior he spent moping and immersed in memories of him. But this year he'd nearly forgotten. Luffy's hands went to his hat, for comfort, for relief. His fingers flexed the straw, bending the weave in frustration as he sought for some semblance of solace. It was wrong to forget. His knees slowly bent and he lowered himself to the floor. It was all these dates, so many. All in a row. Rapid fire. Gatling. His back met the seat and he leaned into it with a sigh. He needed some structure, otherwise, he might lose the will he had employed to keeping his form, and he'd dribble down into a deformed rubber puddle on the floorboards. His birthday was first. The last 2 years had been lonely, particularly on his birthday. Rayleigh couldn't be bothered by a birthday. They were training to get stronger. He agreed with that, he hadn't wanted to stop anyway. His nakama didn't know his birthday. Maybe he should tell them and they'd throw a big party, maybe. But it was late. Next year, maybe. And the date his nakama were blown away when they were all separated. That hadn't been hard last year, he'd been busy. But this year he'd been worried. What if someone mixed up the date? What if someone came a week too late? What if Zoro got lost? Then was Ace. 2 years ago was the last time he'd seen his brother breathing. Last time he'd seen him at all. He'd powered through it the last 2 years with sufficient crying and hard reality checks. Rayleigh had helped him through the first anniversary, but this year he'd sat on a cliff and cried for most of the day. And now, Sabo. 12 years ago Sabo had sailed out in his fishing boat and sailed the black flag. That was the only day he'd been able to. He was gone as well. 2 death days and a birthday. Nice. He wished it was his death day and Sabo's birthday. Wished it was Ace's birthday. Wished it was 2 birthdays and 1 death. But it was what it was, and he'd nearly forgotten. What kind of brother was he? He clenched his fingers around the brim of his hat, reminded himself that it was only a few weeks ago that the anniversary of their toast had happened, that had been one of the happiest days of his life. And his birthday doubled as the day he set sail, another time when he couldn't have been much happier. But he could feel it. Feel that helplessness that he rolled into a little ball and stuffed away in the farthest corner of his mind. He was a captain, he was a pirate. He'd cried enough, and he was back with his crew, and he needed to stop this. What happened, happened. No regrets. With a shuddering breath, he pushed off from the seat to his feet and pasted a smile onto his face. The next step forward was supposed to be just that. Forward, away from the grief and the past. The past didn't matter. His muscles stretched and pulled at his movement, tense and ready to run. He walked. He didn't have time to grieve today anyway. His crew couldn't see. It was best he forget about the date, all of them. They didn't matter. The pressure of his grief against the door he'd locked it behind increased tenfold, the wood splintered, the wave flowed out and unleashed. The sob he hadn't realized had been hiding crawled out of his throat and he stumbled. Beneath the tension, he finally snapped. Usopp chews on his fist, blocking the yawn from escaping his mouth as he stumbles out of the kitchen and onto the grassy deck. The night air is cool on his skin and the sea spray stings a little with the frigidity. He misses his warm hammock already. Shutting his mouth he meanders towards the main mast and looks straight up at the top. It's a 90-degree angle, and no matter how many times he's climbed it, Usopp still gets nervous when he thinks about climbing to the top or to the bottom, for that matter. Another cold breath of wind to the back of his neck is enough to urge him onto the climbing pegs that lead up to the observation room. The wood is worn smooth, which he was happy about at first. He could stop getting splinters from the new wood. But he quickly learned that smooth wood was slippery, and that was not what he wanted. Nevertheless, he's done this enough times that after a few pegs up, he doesn't much notice the height he's gaining, and he knows well enough not to look down. He does look up though, not at the observation room, but at the sky above it. Clouds are moving in on the clear night, and the stars are getting fuzzy at the touch of haze that comes with the edges of each cloud. He knows land must be relatively close because he can hear a seagull off at some short distance, cawing and squawking as it travels over the sea. He sneezes and wonders idly which one of his followers is thinking about him right now, or if it's a bounty hunter thinking about Sajikine. At the top of the mast is the promise of a warm room, a number of blankets, and a probably drifting Luffy, who tends to get chatty and eager to snuggle the more tired he gets. That is enough to make Usopp pick up the pace till he reaches the trapdoor in the bottom of the observation room, pushing it open with shivering fingers and pulling himself inside to relish the warmth and the glory that is Frankie's brain and running heating up here. Alright Luffy, my shift. No, I did not bring snacks. Usopp speaks through another yawn, pulling himself totally onto the floor of the observation room and shuts the door behind him, sealing the cold air out and the warm air in. There's a quiet snuffling that is Luffy moving around in blankets and offering him a half-conscious reply, and Usopp chuckles. It's not the first time Luffy's fallen asleep on watch, he's just lucky Nami isn't coming to relieve him, or Sanji. He stands and stretches, rubbing his eyes and stepping gingerly over a few of the scattered weights on the floor. It would be cleaner, if only because Nami or Robin would pick them up and put them away after a while, except half of them are too heavy for anyone but Zoro or Luffy to lift. He plops down on the seat next to the huge jumble of blankets and a tuft of black hair that is the fearsome captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. You should be careful about when you fall asleep, he cautions good-naturedly. Imagine if I were Nami or Sanji, sent to check up on you. Or if I a monster. He laughs, picking the spyglass off the seat and giving the ocean surrounding Sunny a quick scan, just to make sure Luffy didn't really miss anything important. I guess you could beat up a monster pretty easily, but the way you're snoring right now you might just sleep through it. He laughs again, and Luffy mumbles in his sleep, though it sounds a bit agitated, and Usopp wonders if perhaps he's not half asleep, but completely, and sleep-talking to boot. Annoyed, he shoves the lump in the blankets that he thinks is Luffy's shoulder. Hey now, don't sleep while I have to stay awake. Talk to his request sputters to a halt as the blanket slides and Luffy sits up, rubbing his eyes. Or maybe he's not Luffy. The toddler, okay, probably older than a toddler, but listen, this kid is like 3 feet tall. Is yawning, rubbing at his eyes and looking around the room, as though he's trying to orient himself in a place he knows, only to find that he doesn't know it at all. Swaddled, it's the only word for it, really, in a few blankets and Luffy's red shirt and sash. The shorts are there too, but they're just hardly on, not as swaddling as the shirt, and to be honest the shirt is plenty, loose as it fits on Luffy, or the kid. Usopp jerks back as the kid angled his gaze up at him, blinking wide brown eyes and the edge of a smile tugging at his lips. He knows it's Luffy because the kid is making the same face Luffy makes when he wakes up and sees someone he likes. Hi. I'm Luffy, who the heck are you? The scar pretty much seals the deal too. It is to a shrill shriek that Nami's body responds, sitting bolt upright as her eyes blow wide in panic, lending her immediate clear vision. On the other side of the room, Robin lifts her head from the desk with a jerk, waking up at the sound, the pages of her book flipping closed without her head to keep them apart. They exchange a moment's glance before Nami tosses the covers to the floor, and Robin swivels in the chair to follow the navigator as she throws the door open and charges down the hall, Robin pausing to put on slippers and a robe. Nami's thoughts race faster than her feet, considering and filing possibilities as to the source of the scream. She's already eliminated everyone except Chopper, Usopp, and Brook when she nearly runs into Zoro, who is tromping down the hallway towards the lower bowels of the ship. Usopp's on watch, he grumbles in response to her unasked question, and the tension bleeds out of her shoulders. I'm gonna kill him, she vows, twisting her hand into a fist and taking Zoro's elbow with her other arm to lead him back on deck. Zoro yawns and follows slowly, mumbling in low undertones about the lack of sleep a person can get on this ship. Topper is heading toward the observation room as well, always one to believe Usopp's lies, even if he's not telling lies so much as portraying falsehood, and he crowds around Nami's legs when he sees her. Nami? Did you hear that? That was Usopp. Usopp is in trouble. He chatters, pulling at the bottom of Zoro's coat, still hugging Nami's legs. And another scream echoes through the ship, reverberating in the wood of the hull and the halls. Nami slants a gaze at Zoro for his opinion. Usopp screams a lot, but not usually twice in a row, unless the first time wasn't just a shadow or a cold draft. Chopper squeals and rushes out toward the deck, calling that he's coming to help Usopp. Zoro only shrugs. Luffy was on watch earlier. That did widen the range of possibilities. Pulling Zoro's arm again, Nami leads him through the halls and the kitchen to stand beneath a mast on the grassy deck. Nami is barefoot and she shivers in her thin silk nightgown, it's peach, a gift from Robin. The night is getting pretty chilly, but she hadn't realized that tucked beneath her covers, and she's starting to regret trusting the weather to stay warm enough for her to be wearing a nightgown at all. Zoro is yawning, but he's warm, having never changed out of his green robe. Chopper is already halfway up the mast, in heavy point, so he can reach the rungs. Nami wraps her arms around herself and shivers, then turns to Zoro. You will wait until I am through that door before you even glance up, or else I'll triple your debt. Zoro grunts and eyes her nightgown, acknowledging how the lacy hem flutters in the breeze. I'm not the love cook, I don't care. Well I do, so look that way. Nami grabs Zoro's shoulders and twists him to face the door to the kitchen, where Robin is stepping out in her own lavender flannels. Nami grabs onto the first peg and pulls herself up, focusing on the beating she'll be able to give Usopp when she reaches the top, and the blankets that they keep piled in the closet that she has curled up in on many a snowy night with a cup of tea that Sanji brought her. The next bite of wind feels especially chilling, and Nami shivers, releasing the ladder with one hand to push her dress down. Chopper's squeal of surprise is not what almost knocks Nami off the ladder. That title goes to the child's yell of surprise. It's a talking raccoon. Nami forgets to hold on and stares upward at the trapdoor left open in the bottom of the observation room. The light inside is playing over the last few pegs of the ladder, looking incredibly warm and inviting. There are a few clouds beginning to crowd around the moon, and she can smell the snowstorm creeping towards the ship. With the sudden realization that she is slipping, she latches on tighter and scrambles the last few pegs up into the observation room, getting a face full of frantic Chopper and a split-second glance at a short boy in her captain's shirt and several blankets, smiling her captain's smile and laughing her captain's laugh. And here she thought she was the master thief for being able to steal gold. 1. Zoro sighs, rubbing his face with his hand. He really should have gone up there first. Robin is watching the blurry silhouettes play around where the gold light touches and contemplating what might be happening based on them and the multitude of screams and nonsensical phrases being shouted. All three of our most skittish crewmates are up there, she reasons. It's quite likely nothing too dreadful, only their minds playing tricks. Yeah, but Luffy's up there too. Ah. That does change things. Zoro groaned and stepped onto the first rung of the ladder, pulling himself up several at a time, almost like pull-ups. Zoro, toss down a blanket, would you? He grunts in response to that and finishes the climb, hauling himself up into the observation room. The moment he puts his feet on the floor, someone's flailing hand runs into the light switch and the room descends into darkness. The collective shriek puts another groan in Zoro's throat as he fumbles around for a blanket. Ah. Someone's got me. Chopper cries. Just me. Zoro drops the frantic reindeer whose fur he'd mistaken as one of the blankets. Zoro. Usopp yelps and latches his arms around Zoro's chest, and Zoro grunts at the extra weight. Get off, he says gruffly, rough hands unclenching Usopp's arms from around him. Someone put on the lights. He runs his hands out in front of him, feels a soft touch of silky skin. Zoro. Her fist implants itself in his head and he is knocked backward against the wall. Your debt is going to quadruple for that, you imbecile, you insolent idiot. Shut up, witch, it's dark. He pushes himself to his feet, feeling forward again. He thought he was on the wall, looking for the light switch, but his fingers catch the fabric of a blanket, so he must be more along the windows where the benches and blankets are. Because he might as well, he tosses it down the hatch to Robin. That's one thing off his list of things to do now. He turns, now putting his hands on the wall. Who the heck turned off the lights? He demands and Usopp squeaks a small apology, while Zoro finally stubs his hand against a switch and it flips upward. Light floods into the room, it's a bit of a war zone. Chopper has been trapped beneath some of the weights on the floor, most of the blankets are on the floor, spread over the mess. Outside, the window clouds have started to peel away from the moon, and it's doubling the brightness of the room, glinting off the chrome weight handles to make the place sparkle. Nami is red in the face and strangling Usopp while he tries to explain through frantic hand motions that he's innocent. Nami turns her glare to Zoro, her face folded into a blazing origami figure of an angry tigress, done in bright orange paper. Her fingers unclench from Usopp's necks, and he slithers weakly down to the floor as she stalks towards Zoro, putting each bare foot down in between the scattered weights. Zoro. I'm sure you recall the price of straying hands. She grounds out as she approaches, fully prepared to demand to be paid in full immediately. Usopp pushes himself off the ground and stares around the room frantically. Where did he go? He whips around, like whoever he's looking for might have snuck behind him. I don't know, Chopper wails, struggling out from under the weight and flinging a few blankets into the air, as though the subject of his desperation might be hiding beneath one of them. Oh yeah, wasn't Luffy up here? Zoro realizes and Nami stops her advance long enough to allow a confused, thoughtful expression to light across her face before saying, resolutely, no. In sync, both Chopper and Usopp yell a frantic yes. That was not Luffy. Nami spins around with a hiss and a withering glare. That was some ridiculous devil fruit user that we are going to hunt off of our ship the second we figure out where Luffy decided to take a nap this shift. Nah. Chopper shakes his head viciously and Usopp copies the movement. He smelled like Luffy. And he had his scar. But that was a kid, Nami stresses, nevertheless picking up a blanket to peek underneath as well. He was a toddler or something. Luffy, as she pauses shocked for a moment. How old is Luffy? 19 or 20? 19. Zoro grunts. There was a kid up here. Little toddler kid. No, Luffy was a kid that was up here. This tall. Usopp holds his hand 2 or 3 feet off the floor. Ask me who I was, all high. I'm Luffy. Who the heck are you? Sounds like Luffy. Zoro snorts, but he frowns and glances out the window. Luffy could have been joking. Totally possible. He could have shrunk himself with third gear, wanted to scare Usopp. It wouldn't be the first time he'd done something of that nature. But this seemed a little too extravagant for Luffy's everyday antics. First step is to find Luffy, can we agree on that? Nami decides, planting her hands on her hips. Then we get rid of whatever idiot devil fruit user decided to stow away on our ship and imitate our captain. Zoro could tell her that it was most assuredly not another devil fruit user, that there are exactly 9 auras aboard this ship. Observation hockey isn't his forte, so the vague presences he feels aren't in a clear area so much as near and a particular number. He can distinguish each, there are 9, like there always are on the Sunny. So no, there is no stowaway aboard. He let Nami think about that because he recognizes that there are 2 presences down underneath them. 2 presences where he'd left only Robin. He should probably feel a little bad, he threw his captain off the mast, but he can't muster the sentiment. Luffy deserves it, causing all this trouble in the middle of the night. 1. Robin stands in the cold beneath the mast. In all technicality, the observation room can hold as many as Sunny currently houses. The reason she remains below is because she is certain that an extra body up there would not be helpful at the moment. She is absolutely positive because she has both an eye and an ear in the room, and it tells her no more than she already knew down below the room. She can't see anything in the dark, and she hears nothing but the scrambling and yelling of her crewmates. Opening her eyes, she banishes the extra appendages, instead staring up at the observation room from her actual vantage point. Staying up there was a waste of energy, and it was growing increasingly hard to focus as the cold intensified. The night had been relatively clear, but when she'd come out on deck she'd noticed gathering clouds, meaning possible snowfall. Carefully, she picks out some of the constellations still visible and counts the amount of time she has to rub her arms each minute in order to retain a tolerable body heat. The sight of a cloth fluttering out of the observation room hatch brings a fragile smile to her face. She's in soft flannels and a robe, but it's no contest when she's competing with the weather of the Grand Line, or the New World for that matter. This is why they keep a large quantity of blankets in the observation room, so that when the temperature took a dive, the crew could weather the shift. In light, lavender flannels, Robin is not weathering the shift. But the blanket blotting out the sky is her ticket to warmth, and the flood of relief is welcome as she grows a few hands from the mast to capture the material before a wind catches it. Her fingers grasp the edge of the blanket, a fur, she now realizes, and she also comes to understand that it's not just a blanket. The weight that tugs the fur from her fingertips is not heavy enough to be Usopp Nami, but Chopper was up there too, and that estimation feels about right. She calls out a soft summoning of more limbs to snatch both ends of the blanket from the air, keeping poor Chopper cradled inside the blanket. Though each of the straw hats are sturdy, this is not the time of night to be checking how well the little reindeer can fall. Robin will be scolding Zoro about this later, even if she's sure it was only a mix-up given the darkness that enveloped the observation deck when she'd stolen a peek. She tugs at the momentum of the fur so that it falls more towards her and slings it around the mast a few times to disperse the force of the fall. She can hear giggling inside the fur, and she may swing it around a time or two extra for the pleasure of the little reindeer passenger. When her extra limbs dissolve into flower petals and she drops the blanket the last few feet to the ground, it's not Chopper's hat that pokes its way out of the bundle, but Luffy's. That was fun. Her little captain cheers, giggling happily and fumbling his way out of the blanket. He's small, very short. His straw hat is falling far over his face, but his hand seems to have an easy way of pushing it out of the way. It never occurred to Robin that Luffy may have grown into his hat. She's never seen him up close after Gear 3rd, and it's actually rather fascinating. To think that rubber would hold such properties as to revert a man back to such a size, he looks like any other child might. With slightly chubby fingers and an innocent glint in his eyes when he spins around to look up at the observation room. He seems not to have noticed Robin's presence yet, but he's happy all the same. "Oh, did I fall from up there?" He wonders aloud, and Robin laughs at his voice, which has also been shifted into a higher pitch, akin to that of a child. Luffy immediately switches his attention to Robin, a grin splitting his interested O from its place on his lips. He doesn't seem bothered by the temperature yet, though his cheeks are looking a little rosy, and he is still wrapped in the blanket, so that isn't to be unexpected. Particularly since Luffy has never had a just idea of how to perceive cold. "Hi. I'm Luffy." The boy is grinning ear to ear, as though he thinks it's just fine that he just got thrown from the top of a 50-foot-tall mast. Robin seals her lips closed at the introduction and pushes her face into a politely amused expression. "Hello Luffy, I'm Robin." His face lights up, and she thinks that maybe her diminutive captain remembers her, but instead his eyes are filled with curiosity and wonder. Robin is a really pretty name, like a bird. "I bet you can fly." She pins her expression into place, resigning herself to the fact that something has happened, and her captain most likely will not be remembering her all that soon. As to why Luffy is a toddler and doesn't seem to remember his crew member will be addressed shortly, she is sure. "As a matter of fact, I can fly." She watches his wonder turn to eager awe, his smile growing wider still, and his brown eyes glowing from within at the thought. "Really?" She nods. "Can you take me flying?" "I can sort of fly, but A says it's just falling." He pouts and Robin's eyebrow twitches with the instinct to rise when she hears Ace's name, but she refrains from addressing the mentioning, instead opting to shake her head minutely in answer to his question. I'm afraid I cannot assist you, I'm not very good at it myself, you see. Luffy's mouth tilts into a disappointed frown, and Robin chuckles, putting a hand on his head, subtly feeling for bumps that might have caused his condition under the guise of ruffling his hair. How do you fly, Luffy? I'm rubber. He says, stretching his cheeky smile so it's way out of shape. I hold onto something tall and stretch out my arms, and then I shoot myself YIA up. His cheek snaps back into place when he raises his arms towards the sky. I could show you. I call it Gum Gum Rocket. Oh no, that's quite alright. She catches one of his arms as he searches for something to grab onto. You wouldn't want to fall into the ocean and drown. The ocean? Luffy drops his arms and tilts his head like he's confused. Why would I fall in the ocean? Robin laughs at his innocent befuddlement before pointing over his shoulder, and he turns to look where she's pointing, out over the railing of the ship, and he stares vacantly at the waves and the dark horizon for a moment. She's surprised he hadn't heard it before now. The wind is rather harsh, and it's pulling the waves high up against the hull, slapping against the wood like each is knocking on a door. Everything but the grass beneath their feet screams you're at sea. And still Robin watches the exact, belated moment that Luffy realizes he's on a ship that is sailing on open water. His vacant look tremors for a moment before every inch of his face begins to exude happiness. His eyes glisten with excitement, and his smile is falling off his face because it doesn't even fit. The energy of it is dripping into the rest of his body, so he starts jumping in place, laughing and cheering. I'm on the ocean. I'm sailing. He bounces over to the railing and leans a little too far over the side for Robin's taste, holding out his hand for salt water to spray onto. He shivers at the chill and laughs loudly, spinning around and darting past Robin's arms on his way to explore the deck. Robin? Usopp yells from the observation room, and she divides her attention, letting her eyes follow Luffy's trek across the deck, and her ears devote themselves to what her crewmates are yelling about. Move, Usopp, Nami cuts in. Robin, is Luffy down there? He skipped out on watch again. Yes, Robin answers easily, watching Luffy clamber onto the yellow painted wood and peek around the center main piece. He's on the figurehead. See, he's fine. We've got some rogue look-alike devil fruit user stowaway. Nami growls to Usopp, who grumbles an acknowledging sound. Robin smiles at an amusing thought. Luffy, you shouldn't stand up there, a sea king might come and eat you. Ha. Nami barks. We haven't seen any sea kings for weeks because they're scared of him. Robin, are you feeling okay? Usually your morbid predictions are more factual. Usopp leans a little out of the bottom door, and when Robin glances up at him his face is folded into concern. What? Robin's sick. Chopper squeals from behind him, and Robin is quick to assure the both of them that she is just fine. She offers Usopp a smile and shakes her head. I'm just fine. I don't want to get eaten. Luffy streaks across the deck and hurtles into Robin's unsuspecting arms, shrieking all the way. She manages to keep the both of them from toppling over into the grass, with nothing more than a few extra limbs, and she holds onto the boy that is now wrapped tightly around her torso, multiple times. What the Luffy? Usopp screeches, leaning forward and almost tumbling out of the observation room, but Nami wrenches him out of the way so that she can look down herself. Sure enough, in a pool of orangey light played out by the lanterns Frankie keeps continually lit on deck, is Robin, only standing thanks to some extra legs and braced arms, being clung to by a blubbering child, his arms and legs looped tightly around her torso in several layers. There are two options to ponder. Either Luffy is suddenly a toddler, or a much harder to accept alternative, which involves another person eating Luffy's devil fruit. Thus, Nami spins around, ducks under Zoro's arm, and slams her palm down on the intercom button. Everyone on deck. 1. Sanji sits bolt upright in his hammock, steadying the swing caused by the sudden movement, with a hand on each side of the cloth cocoon. His beloved Nami-san's voice was echoing through the intercom system, begging for his presence at her side. Nami Swan. He vaults out of the hammock and hits the floorboards in his bare feet, stumbling and hissing curses as the cold seeps into his skin. Still, he composes himself with the thought of Nami's voice, stepping forward and twirling through the dark to the door. I'm coming, my sweet. Or he would be twirling out to answer her call if, from the gloom, there hadn't risen a hulking metal body from his bunk right next to the door that exited into the hallway which exited onto the deck where his Nami-san was summoning him. Frankie stretches his metal arms over his head and groans as the joints squeal. He grumbles about no time to oil up, while Sanji grinds the ball of his foot against the floor. Boy, stupid cyborg. Move it. He fishes around in his pockets and groans when he remembers he doesn't keep cigarettes in his pajama pockets. Eh? Frankie rolls his shoulders and cracks his neck, gears popping into place as he turns to look at Sanji, who is still standing there, sullenly, stubbing his toe against the floor like he wants to kick Frankie through a wall. Nami-san just called for us, get moving. It's too early and I'm too low on cola to listen to you, Frankie growls, his fuel warning beeping softly in his ear. Usually, he got a bottle right before breakfast, but they weren't going to have breakfast at, what? He checked the nearest clock and grumbled at the reading, 3:22 am. Sanji sneers in response and Frankie makes a snide face. Even though he knows Sanji can't see it in the dark, he himself can see Sanji, only because of his night vision adjustment mechanism. Didn't you hear the call of a damsel in distress? Sanji fumes. My sweet darling has requested my presence at her side. Frankie rolls his eyes again, deliberately taking his time with his morning calibrations before making to step toward the door. Actually, Sanji-san, Nami-san asked all of us to come to the deck. Brooke strolled up behind them, so we should all be on our way. His white face is expressionless as always, but Frankie can clearly pick out the senior's advice from the inflection in his voice. Let's all get along, no sense in ruining a day so early. If this is about Usopp, I'm going to make him sail behind us in the mini-Mary for the next 2 days. Woken up twice in one night is too much, a man needs his sleep. Frankie rubs his hand over his face, stopping for a moment. A man needs to serve his lady. Sanji wails, trying to sidestep around the cyborg, who has angled himself in the hallway so that Sanji can't possibly get past him. So not super. Frankie ignores him, the smaller yellow hand popping out of his palm and rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He was purposefully stalling. Unless this is a big thing, I'm going right back to bed. It's as good a time as any to start the day. Brooke countered, chipper. Perhaps you should refuel before you get on deck, you seem rather irritable. I'm just tired, Skelly. Frankie sighs and presses his nose, his hair morphing into his shark fin do. But that might be just what I need. Sanji knocked his head against the wall until the exchange was over, legs jittery, with a need to kick the two morons out of the way and use the leftover anxiety to sprint to his Nami Swan side. So as they passed the kitchen, Frankie ducked out of the line and through the door, snatching a bottle of cola off the table, put there last night with the specific purpose of satisfying Frankie's cola needs. He tended to get a little cranky when he woke up, so if he had the second night watch it was good to have it there, even if it sometimes got messed with Usopp cough and tossed it into his stomach. His mechanisms churned for a moment and then the flood of cola rushed through his system and he breathed a sigh of relief. That's more like it. He stretched his arms over his head and arched his back again. His hair now perfectly coiffed, he burst back into the hallway where Brooke was politely waiting for his return, knuckles folded carefully around the curve of his cane. Sanji-san went on ahead, he said, and Frankie shrugged. Whatever, curly bro gets grouchy in the morning anyway. They strolled together. Actually, Frankie sort of sauntered toward the door to the deck, but the closer they got, the more urgent the situation seemed to become. Of course, this was only based on the frantic yelling on the other side of the door and its gradual increase in volume. The two exchange a look, Frankie's eye flashing mechanically and Brooke's eye socket lighting up for a moment as light slanted in, so that you could almost see it playing across the back of his skull. You too. Sanji bursts inside from the deck, slamming the door shut behind him. Stay inside. Way inside. He's wincing as the words leave his mouth, but he doesn't hesitate to say them. Now the three of them stare at each other, Frankie's mouth open in the start of a retort, while Brooke clacks his jaw and resets his fingers on his cane, his aura betraying the slightest pinch of hurt, while his skull remains emotionless. Sanji's lips are weighted with curses, though his eye is focused, there's no talk of his ladies, his posture betrays his trepidation and uncertainty. Frankie and Brooke are unsure how to react to Sanji looking nervous. So they each nod and retreat back to the men's cabin, well out of everyone's way, even though they feel the curiosity and urge to help wrapping around bones and coiling in cogs. I don't want to get eaten, Luffy repeated frantically, and Robin rubbed her extra hand along his back soothingly as the child cried into her shoulder. She's marveling at the fact that though Luffy must be able to feel her two arms trapped beneath his own rubbery ones, he doesn't seem surprised that there is a third arm in the mix of things. There is no way that's Luffy, Nami growls, gripping each rung with frustration, while Usopp chatters above her about magic spells and out-of-control devil fruit powers. Shut up, Usopp. She barked. Usopp's chatter died down to a low string of nervous muttering. It's not that impossible. Zoro said, continuing to climb a few rungs beneath her. Luffy. Exasperated fondness laced his tone. I know, Luffy, she mocks, she's too white to sound fond. But look at him. All four of them turn their heads to the deck, looking at the child version of a man they'd seen knock people out simply by wishing it, declare war on the world, and come out of a hard-fought battle with bloody knuckles. Sometimes it's his blood, often it's not. Now though he is clinging to Robin as though he can't bear to be without contact and some form of protection. As though he actually fears the prospect of a Sea King eating him. The punchline being that Sea King is one of his favorite pre-dinner snacks. It was a strange sort of vertigo. Robin twists around to look up at them, still cradling Luffy, and she gives them a meaningful look and then nods her head towards Luffy. The message is clear, get down here. Nami swings her foot at Zoro's head and whispers that he had better hurry up, to which Zoro complies, dropping the last few yards to the ground rather than climbing it. We haven't seen any Sea Kings for almost a week. Robin assures the trembling boy wrapped around her torso. She pries carefully at his fingers, which are starting to dig a little too deep for her taste. Still, Luffy refuses to loosen his grip, only pauses in his quiet blubbering. "Are you sure?" The voice is wobbly, and it is obvious that the owner is holding back tears. "I'm quite positive," Robin affirms, rocking back and forth, almost subconsciously. Nami creeps forward, edging into Luffy's line of sight, which is actually rather limited at the moment, his face buried in Robin's shoulder as it is. "Hi there," she says once she caught one slightly teary brown eye peeking through Robin's hair at her. "Hi," Luffy answers dejectedly. He blinks at her for a moment, then rears back with a gasp. "Ah." He pulls his arms loose from Robin. It takes a moment because they'd gotten tangled, which was unusual. Luffy hated getting tangled. Once they are free, he scrubs at his eyes, sniffling, just slightly. "I'm not a crybaby, I wasn't crying." He denies without anybody accusing him. He ducks his head away from the two women only to find himself staring at Zoro. He stares at the older man's scowl for a moment before his gaze inches upwards. "Wow, awesome. Your hair is green. That's so cool." Zoro grunts what sounds like an affirmation, though he'd call it a denial, while Usopp peeks out from behind him. "Ah, Longnose Akin. I'm sorry I scared you." He grins a smile that says he's actually very happy about it and bows. "You didn't scare me." Usopp protests, stepping away from Zoro. "Idiot. Nothing scares the great Usopp-sama." "Oh? Then why did you scream?" Luffy tilts his head to the side and makes his confused face, which looks deceptively like a thinking face. Not that they don't recognize it, if this is Luffy, he hasn't changed much since he was younger. Usopp, to his credit, only has to think for a moment before locking into his favorite story genre, fictional autobiography work. It's a greeting between heroes, taught to the valedictorian of every class which graduates from the Inter-Blue Hero School. I assumed you would know it because you look just the age to be graduating the junior prep class. And very heroic. I'm not a hero. Luffy shakes his head furiously, the hat dips in over his face, and he knocks it back straight. Heroes share meat, and I'm not sharing, nah. He puffs out his cheeks and crosses his arms. Of course. Usopp amends while Nami seems simultaneously ready to strangle the boy and cuddle him. "You must have been in the warrior class then, no wonder you didn't understand the traditional greeting." "Luffy, these are some of my friends." Robin interrupts. "Zoro, Usopp, Nami, and Chopper," she points to each in turn and Luffy's head swivels between them all, mouthing their names like he's worried he'll forget them. Which he might. "I don't know any of you guys." He realizes suddenly, twisting to look out over the railing to the sea. "I don't remember setting sail. Are you guys bad?" "You don't seem bad, but A says I'm bad at guessing that stuff, and Sabo says I can't trust people just cause they seem nice." "Sounds like good advice," Nami says dryly, remembering the times Luffy had wholeheartedly trusted enemies because they fed him or said something funny. Luffy's definition of seems nice had a lot to be desired. "Just look at Zoro. It's good of you to listen to their advice." Robin smiles, just a small petite curve, but Luffy beams. "Yeah. My brothers know everything." "Brothers? I thought you only had one brother." Usopp asks before Nami manages to clap a hand over his mouth. "You idiot." She hisses he hasn't told us anything, he might get suspicious. But of course, Luffy doesn't. "Nah, Ace and Sabo are two people," he holds up two fingers to verify for them. "We all drank sake, it tasted yucky." He makes a face, sticking out his tongue. "But now we're brothers." Luffy looks like a picture of happiness, face so scrunched with his smile that you can't even see the crescent scar that runs beneath his eye. It's blended with the curve of his eye, because there's not enough space left over for all his facial features, what with the proud smile he's displaying front and center. You don't have to worry, Luffy." Chopper edges out from behind Zoro's leg. "We're good people, hey then." Luffy's still beaming, though obviously he's now excited because he feels like he's done what his brothers told him to. "People can lie about that stuff, you know," Nami mumbles to herself, quiet so Luffy can't hear. Pointing it out to him wouldn't do any good, he wouldn't listen, and if he did it wouldn't be good for their current predicament. It wasn't like they could tell the 7-year-old that he was wanted for a large sum of money and was actually 19 and was their captain. "Hey, can I go back home now?" Ace and Sabo are going to be worried, and last time I left without telling them they only let me eat the tail. "The tail?" Chopper and Usopp echo. Of the crocodile, Luffy pouts the head is the best part, but Ace always gets that. "Ah, he's talking about food. We can't bring you home right now, Luffy," Nami apologizes, kneeling down next to him. He looks at her expectantly and she bites her lip, trying to come up with an acceptable excuse. Then she smiles. "We're on an adventure." "An adventure?" Luffy cries, eyes gleaming. "When I grow up I'm gonna go on lots of adventures, and I'm going to have really great nakama, and we're all gonna be the greatest pirates on the ocean. I get to be the captain." Ace and Sabo said they're gonna have their own cruise, and I should join one of them, but I'm gonna convince them to join me. He crosses his arms and looks to the side, muttering about stupid older brothers. Then he brightens, puffs out his chest. I'm going to be the pirate king. Usopp ducks away, hugging Chopper. He has such confidence in us. They both sob quietly. But you can come with us now. Nami urges we can send a letter to your brothers to tell them where you are. We're pirates, just like you want to be. Really? You guys are pirates? He looks up at Zoro with more than a hint of adoration. But then his smile droops and he looks down at his feet. But Ace smiles more when it's all three of us. He darts a glance around deck and his gaze is undoubtedly longing. I can't stay, but your ship is really super cool. He brightens. When I turn 17 I'll look for you guys. He's moving before any of them understand what he's talking about. He spins around and climbs up the stairs, trying to get to the highest point he can reach easily. When he does, he cranes his neck and stares at the top of the mast, above the observation room, where there flies a banner of black cloth, a skull and crossbones emblazoned across it. I'll draw your Jolly Roger when I get home, so I won't forget. He freezes as he finally notices the straw hat perched upon the skull's head. Luffy's hands creep behind him, pulling the straw hat from around his neck. He holds it up to compare it to the flag. His eyes narrow and he closes one, trying to see both clearly at the same time. He turns back to them looking angry, and for a second Nami thinks he's figured out something important. You guys stole my Jolly Roger. Or, maybe not. That's what my flag is gonna be. You can't have it. He fumes. A flag is a pirate's pride. You can't take mine before I even have a chance to fly it. His eyes widen, hands grasping the brim of his hat with white fingers, nearly ripping the poor thing. Do you want my hat? Is that why I'm here instead of home? You can't have it, it's my promise. Shanks gave it to me. It means I'm going to be king of the pirates. His anger has shifted into frantic yelling, his eyes dart between them all, uncertain as to who to trust and who to blame. I don't get it. He cries, his anger melting into despair in an instant. He's spiraling out of control, and none of them can get a word in edgewise. He's not listening, not at all. You said you were nice. You all feel good. He squeezes his eyes shut, yelling. Why are you all bad? It was all a horrible misunderstanding, but each of them felt the pain in their chest. A child was yelling at them, a child who they knew would grow to become a man they all respected and owed their lives to. And he was now condemning them, convinced that they were bad people for trying to steal his dream. It hurt. For a group of people who was formed to accomplish his dream, and theirs too, hearing him accuse them of stealing, it hurt. Nami-san. How may I serve you? The door flies open, right beneath where Luffy is standing, the deck above the kitchen entrance, revealing a pajama-clad Sanji, leaping forward with his arms in the air. I'd awake to your call at any time. You must only whisper my name in your angelic voice, and I will hear it and be summoned from even the greatest of distances. For nothing can separate true lovers. Sanji-kun. Now is not the time. Nami hisses, eyes only for Luffy, whose face is slowly morphing into one of his confused faces. It's the one he makes when he exhausts himself after a battle and doesn't seem to grasp the reason that he's falling over. He mouths something, probably meant to say it, but there's no sound, and he realizes this, brow furrowing, and he says it again, loud, so they hear this time. Ase Abu, he moans, eyes instantly filling with tears. I'm scared. Chopper whimpers and takes a few steps forward, hooves twitching with the urge to go help the vulnerable figure standing on the upper deck. Robin frowns but still holds him back from running to him, though clearly she has the same urge. Sanji's eye widens as he turns and looks up at the child, succumbing first to sniffles, then dipping into quiet sobs, still the confused crinkle on his face. The moment he realizes who the child is marked with an incredibly clear shift in his face, from confusion to resignation and surprise simultaneously, and then to annoyance. Stop that, crap captain. He snaps. I don't know what's going on, but you're upsetting Nami-san. He'd flipped a switch, the quiet sob turns to an all-out bawl and Sanji jerks backward like he's been struck as he realizes that something is really not as it should be. Sanji-kun. Nami screams, pushing him aside as she rushes up towards Luffy, desperate to calm the crying child. Chopper was right next to her, equally loud. Luffy, don't cry. We didn't mean to upset you. He wails, blue nose obscured by the snot that often came with his hysterical tears. Zoro had stepped away from the group, his hand wrapped around the hilt of one of his swords, eye closed, mouth set in a grim line, reaching around the ship with his observation haki. Usopp was mumbling to himself, eyes trained on the wood right beneath Luffy's feet. Luffy, don't get so upset, we can explain things to you if you'll just listen. Nami pleads with the boy, but there's no change. Nami's brain makes a sudden connection, and she hisses to herself, then yells at Sanji. Sanji-kun, go back inside, tell Brook and Frankie to stay inside. They'll scare him. Sanji ducks back into the cabins with a sense of purpose, but also with the air of flight. Luffy is still seemingly inconsolable. It struck the chord of desperation in Nami, the part of her where she wants so horribly much to make him stop crying, that she'll start doing things that'd probably make him cry more. A part of her whispers, "He's just a kid, be calm and kind," while the other part yells, "It's Luffy, just beat him over the head like you always do. Don't be stupid, we don't want your hat, you can have your Jolly Roger." Nami swears, but he keeps going, ignoring her. "Whatever is wrong we can fix, stop crying." Surprisingly, he does, sort of. It is the suddenness of it that leaves worry coiling in Nami's stomach, how his figure completely stills, and his breath immediately turns even. She watches as a shiver runs up his spine, she can tell because his body ripples with it, and there is the slightest gasp as the small boy falls to his knees, silent. "Luffy?" Nami probes after a moment of silence. "Could you come down?" No answer, but then a shuddering breath, an abrupt snap, almost the crack of a whip, and Luffy cries out and lurches to the side, suddenly going limp and crumpling into a discombobulated huddle on the floor. There's a beat of silence, everybody hoping that he'll sit up and whine about how he'd landed on his hat and it was flattened now, or start crying for his brothers. But he doesn't. With a short gasp, Nami scrambles up onto the same level of deck, scooping the boy up to cradle him against her chest, her soft spot for children aching and overriding the exasperation she felt for her captain for doing whatever caused this. She runs light fingers over his arms and face, looking for bumps and scrapes, and then she shakes him gently. He mumbles gibberish and shifts away from her hand, asleep. She sighs with relief, leaning back over the lower level. He's just asleep. Chopper wilts with relief and Zoro grunts. She frowns, looking down at the little boy in her arms. He looks smaller though, and something's different, he looks strange. "Why not we discuss this inside?" Robin interrupts. "It's growing colder, and we should all be present to hear this, no?" "You're right, Robin," Nami quickly agrees, slowly clambering down. "Somebody tell Sanji-kun to put on coffee, looks like our day's starting a bit earlier than usual." Sanji slid a large platter of breakfast rolls into the center of the table, setting the coffee pot on a coaster near Robin. Brooke sipped at his Earl Grey and tried to pay attention to the debate raging across the table. "There's no one else on this ship." Zoro ground out yet again, one hand clenched like a vise around one of his swords, while he held an empty mug in the other and waved it in Robin's general direction as a gesture requesting her to pour him a cup of coffee. "Someone has to be." Nami insisted, she would have been beating some sense into him had her arms not been wrapped loosely around the small body in her lap. Chopper was running a simple checkup on Luffy to try and form a diagnosis for whatever might have caused Luffy's shrinkage and amnesia. This kind of thing doesn't just happen. She gestured randomly at the boy as he squirmed in his sleep, mumbling faintly in gibberish and half sentences. "It's got devil fruit written all over it. We're in the new world. He probably ate something he shouldn't have." Zoro barked and Sanji stopped dead in the process of setting the first actual plates of breakfast on the table. "Are you accusing my cooking, Mosshead?" he growled, leaning across the table to get in his face, and Usopp scooted a little further away from the two. "No, but that's just as likely to have poisoned him as some weird animal or plant." Zoro countered, nonchalant, even as Sanji reached forward and buried his fingers in the man's green hair. "Yeah. This weird plant right here must have done it." Sanji tugged at the hair in his hand, and Zoro lurched forward to clash foreheads with the other man, grabbing his own handful of blonde. "Stop that." Usopp yelled frantically, "You shouldn't make so much noise, what if he wakes up? He's gonna be mad at us." "Then you stop yelling." Nami shrieked at him, "And you too, stop fighting. Now is not the time." "Whoa." Frankie stood up and held out his metal hands to try and calm everyone down, not that a large, red, blue and pink metal cyborg wearing a speedo was all that good at calming people down. Though he does command attention. Sanji had already begun pulling out of the fight when Nami had asked him to, and Zoro released his own grip on the cook's hair with a sigh, while Usopp leaned back in his chair with a worried sigh. "Don't you think we're getting too worked up here? It's probably temporary. He's a what? 5. 6. Usopp guessed, leaning over to look at the child again. 6-year-old kid with a bounty of 500 million on the most dangerous ocean in the world. Usopp said he's on a pirate ship and he sinks like a rock, and he's Luffy. He won't last a day. Sanji nodded grimly while Frankie nudged his shoulder, laughing about lack of faith. "And what if it's not temporary?" Nami asked Frankie. "What if we have to do something to fix it?" "Then we do it," Frankie shrugged, "but freaking out like this isn't doing any good." Frankie is right. All eyes turned to Robin, who had her fingers wrapped around her mug of coffee and her eyes closed serenely. She opened them slowly. "I double-checked, no one is on this ship. Unless it was one of us, no one did anything to cause this to happen. After all, we haven't docked in days. The serum with that kind of incubation period is incredibly rare, and I happen to know there are none with these sorts of effects." She smiled as Usopp accused her of having morbid habits and waited as Nami quieted him with a kick to the shin. "This is a puzzle like any other. We'll solve it one piece at a time." There was a temporary silence as that philosophy settled over the others. They'd done more impossible things before, and not even the gods could keep Luffy from becoming the Pirate King. The hardest part of the whole event was sure to be corralling a wanted, hyper 6-year-old. Usopp chuckled suddenly. At least he's not in diapers or something, then we'd have a problem. Frankie guffawed and reached over to slap him on his back while Nami blushed furiously and Zoro nearly choked on his own coffee. We already have a problem. Chopper said anxiously, finally pulling away from Luffy and taking his stethoscope out of his ears. The mood immediately dropped into negativity, as though plunged into ice water, as all attention was focused on the little doctor. Is something wrong with him? Nami asked, clutching the boy a little tighter before realizing that helped absolutely nothing. He looks perfectly healthy. Robin mused, but Chopper shook his head. His pulse is way too fast, and his blood pressure is really high. How bad is that? Bad. There's a lot of stress on his heart. If he wasn't rubber, I'd predict either burst blood vessels or cardiac arrest. The beat of silence. Well, he is rubber, so let's not worry about that. Usopp stuttered as Nami tried to comfort herself by untangling Luffy's hair. She glanced down to remind herself he was still right there, whining in his sleep about robot steak and grisufi, and then, as her eyes ran casually over his face, she noticed what was missing. She gasped and Chopper was there peering next to her in an instant. What? What happened? His scar is missing. A stitched one, under his eye. Robin asked, curious, while Usopp stood up to lean over the table and look himself. That's what looked wrong to me before. Nami realized and Chopper stepped away at the false alarm. Yeah, I'm not sure where it went. Chopper dropped his stethoscope into his bag where they went actually. Rubber doesn't scar easily, but those he has contracted poof. Gone. He shrugged the bag onto his shoulders. That's another thing, aside from his blood pressure and heart rate there's nothing wrong. His scars are gone, his systems are all functioning normally, everything is just smaller. And his memory. Sanji reminded him, setting a platter of bacon on the table. Speaking of which, let's see what's up with that. He took a strip of meat between two fingers and dangled it over Luffy's nose. The boy twitched, then licked his lips. Nami couldn't help but roll her eyes as he bolted upright and tore the strip out of Sanji's hand, humming with content as the taste settled over his tongue. Wow, you make really good bacon. He stared up at Sanji, then his eyes darted back to the bacon. He licked his lips and reached for a second piece before stopping. Can I eat it? You aren't mad? Usopp blurted and Luffy tilted his head. No. I just want the bacon. Yeah. Go ahead, it's for you. Really? All that? So cool. He beamed and snatched up a handful as though they were chips. Who are you guys? He asked, absently, through a mouthful of bacon. Nami wasn't sure if she should be relieved or worried that his memory was apparently wiped clean again, and she wasn't the only one with mixed feelings. On one hand, it was a second chance to earn his trust, on the other, the problem seemed to be getting worse. Chopper looked ready to faint of relief that the boy wasn't dying of a heart attack, so she probably shouldn't complain. Oh, Luffy-san, do you really not remember us? We're pirates. Nami shouts over Brook, but Luffy doesn't seem to be paying attention to what's actually being said, his eyes trained on Brook. He hesitates. Are you a skeleton? Yes. Are you dead? Yes. That's creepy. How? Well, I ate a devil fruit. What's that? You don't know what a devil fruit is. Usopp yelped as Nami kicked him in the shin, but he plowed on. It's a devil fruit. He stressed. Nope. Does it taste good? No. Came the vehement reply of the other three devil fruit users. It's a fruit that gives you powers but takes away your ability to swim. Robin explains, steam from her coffee coiling in her face. Brook ate one that gave him 2 chances at life. Really? That's cool. But still creepy. You're scary. The boy grinned at his musician, who then slumped down in his seat, bones clicking slightly as his joints shifted. He'd been told he was scary, but he never thought he'd hear it from Luffy-san. He wondered why he wasn't screaming. Actually, he'd been shocked the first time they made eye contact. Not that he was capable of making eye contact, for obvious reasons. I wouldn't want to eat one. I'm learning how to swim. He sticks out his tongue while Robin raises her eyebrow and Sanji exchanges quizzical looks with Usopp, who's gone wide-eyed. Besides, I only like good food. I wouldn't eat something yucky. Sanji snorts at that. You'd eat charred squid drenched in hot sauce and call it gourmet. He thought for a moment, absently puffing out a smoke ring. You did once, now that I think about it. Not that I'd ever burn squid or put hot sauce on it for that matter. He glared at Usopp, who whistled and looked in the other direction, rubbing his hands on his bare arms, which had suddenly been covered with goosebumps. Nah, Makino makes food for me, so I know she'd never feed me something that tasted bad. He sucked on his greasy fingertips as the last of the bacon disappeared. Thanks. You guys are nice. He blinked, tilted his head as his eyes darted around the room again. Who are you guys again? Pirates. Nami cut in before anyone else could. No worries, we're friendly. We thought you might like to go on an adventure with us. Robin interjected smoothly. Shanks told us you are eager to set sail. Shanks? The question was simple, completely innocent, but it threw a pickaxe between the eyes of every Straw Hat except Brooke and Frankie, neither of which had ever before heard the name. The few times Luffy had mentioned Shanks to them, it had been entirely clear that he idolized the man in every sense of the word. Just a half hour ago he tearfully proclaimed that Shanks had given him hat, and that if it was stolen from him, it would break the promise that left him to become Pirate King. If that didn't say something about Luffy's immense admiration of the man, then nothing did. It also left the Straw Hats with almost no knowledge at all, seeing as how his memories of Shanks were about the only part of Luffy's childhood any of them knew even remotely. Yeah. Usopp improvised, waving his hands. Shanks. He's a fisherman, he said he lived on the same island as you for years before he set out to. He paused, fumbling for something interesting enough to entertain Luffy. Fish in the other seas. Sanji filled in, rolling his cigarette between his fingers. He wanted some variety. We ran into him in North Blue. So we mentioned we needed a cabin boy, someone who could brave the Grand Line. Usopp picked up again, Luffy gasped. The Grand Line? Usopp nodded profoundly, leaning forward to poke Luffy's nose with his own. The boy giggled and rubbed the spot where they touched. You know who he suggested? Luffy shook his head, wonder shining in his eyes, breathless with amazement. You? Monkey D. Luffy, in East Blue. He told us, brave and strong and loyal to boot. He wants to be a pirate, and he'd make the best cabin boy you ever did see. Usopp fumbled suddenly, realizing that Luffy would never want to be just a cabin boy. Until he's old enough to lead his own crew as captain, that is. So we sailed straight for East Blue to pick you up. Really? He gasped. You want me to be your cabin boy? And go on adventures? As a pirate? Yes we do. Usopp winked at his crewmates, and Zoro rolled his eye while Robin tittered into her hand. I really want to be a pirate. Luffy clenched his hands into fists and bounced up and down in place before biting his lip and forcefully calming himself down. But you guys should take me home. The boy wilted and jaws dropped. He looked beyond dejected, bordering on depressed, his eyes dark and maybe a little watery as Sanji choked on smoke and Nami dropped her fork while Chopper clutched at his bag of medical supplies. Why's that? Robin prodded and Luffy pouted. You guys are all really nice, but my grandpa is a super strong, really mean, Marine. He doesn't want me to be a pirate, he's training me to be a Marine. Luffy made a face. The uniform is itchy. Chopper gagged while Usopp turned pale at the image of Luffy in a Marine uniform. But he'll get super mad at you for taking me, he'll arrest you, and then you won't be able to be pirates anymore. Luffy threw his hands on the air and stuck his forehead up against Usopp's, eyes gleaming with sincerity and maybe a hint of desperation. So you have to bring me home? You don't want to meet Jai Jai. Especially if he likes you, then he gives you a fist of love. He'll come after you. He warned. You don't have to worry about that. Zoro took a swig from his coffee mug, didn't bother sitting up from his trademarked I don't give a crap about life Ginbu's lounge. We're hardier than we look. We've been through a lot to take our captain where he wants to go. Luffy's interest snagged on the swordsman, and he twisted away from Usopp to look Zoro straight in the eye. Nami made frantic cut-off motions behind Luffy's head, and when that didn't work, pointed at Zoro, and then rubbed her fingers together in the universal symbol for you owe me. Usopp stuttered a few times, trying to catch Luffy's attention again, recognizing that the swordsman was carelessly entering dangerous territory. Aren't you the captain? He asked suddenly and Sanji sputtered, then guffawed whilst Zoro had begun chuckling, but stopped on account of being offended by the cook's adamant reaction. No. He answered shortly. Definitely no. Sanji slapped his knee. You think I'd ever follow this mosshead? Well I dunno. I just met you guys. Luffy defended, stomping his foot as his face shifted into frustrated embarrassment and gained a red tinge. Who is your captain then? He glared around the table with his cheeks puffed out, and when no one answered immediately he stomped his foot again, the two large sandals slipping off. Well then where are they? That's not nice, to bring someone aboard and then not say hello. He's preoccupied at this time. Robin invented as she slid a glass of juice, which she discreetly transferred to the table using extra limbs, towards the boy in an effort to appease him. Yes. Nami supported very urgent business on another island, had to go settle it himself. That's even worse. The captain's job is to protect everyone, so you guys took me, and Jai Jai is gonna come get you and your captain isn't here to help. He breathed in sharply. He's gonna be all mad that I got you guys into trouble. By this time his arms were flailing and his eyes were blown wide. Zoro sighed, reached out a hand and caught Luffy's wrist, pulling the boy to face him. He won't be mad, because we won't get in trouble cause I just told you, we're strong. Strong as Jai Jai? Luffy asked dubiously. Gotta be. Zoro released his wrist and leaned fully back again. Can't reach the One Piece without that kind of strength. Luffy's jaw dropped, his voice came out in a whisper. The One Piece? We're going to find the One Piece. Nods all around the table and Usopp grinned. Luffy was theirs for sure now. And you want me to come? More nods, and Luffy nodded along, quick, jerky, smiling nods as he clenched his teeth in excitement. I'm coming. I'll find treasure to pay off my treasure tab, and I won't ever have to get hit by Jai again, and I'll have adventures, and I'll have lots and lots of friends. Robin looked bemused as she exchanged glances with Nami, who had lost her temporary position as chair in the process of the last few minutes, as at one point or another, Luffy had clambered onto the table. Brook sang out his cheerful laugh, and Sanji slunk off to get the other platters of breakfast he'd prepared. Looking at Luffy, standing on the table and already reaching for the food on the plate Sanji had picked up, it was easy to imagine that maybe they could make this work. Do, like this. Luffy pushes the mop back and forth along the wooden floor of the second-level deck. One of the strings gets caught between the boards, and he stumbles backward, almost tripping on the bucket set behind him. Almost. Usopp catches the mop handle, so the boy has something upright to hang on to. He clings. Just move the mop, don't move with it. Right, Luffy plants his feet, swinging the mop haphazardly, almost poking out Usopp's eye with the round-tipped handle. Good job. He ducks away from the flailing mop handle and stands back against the railing with Nami, watching Luffy swab the deck, spreading more dirty suds than clean ones. Keeping Luffy occupied for the last few hours had not been an easy task, but by filling his time with increasingly odd jobs, they'd managed. Despite the whole morning's fiasco occurring at 3 o'clock in the morning, Luffy hadn't been tired in the slightest. Luckily, the Straw Hats were used to all-nighters. Usopp had been the one tasked with watching out for the diminutive captain. He'd been the obvious choice because of the impression that Luffy had taken of him as an amazing pirate mentor. The whole relationship bordered on imprinting. Most of the others kept their distance, occupied with suddenly pressing tasks. Robin and Chopper researching, Frankie building Luffy-proof railings for the deck, attachable and detachable. Since this whole thing would not be permanent, Brook had warily vanished into the belly of the ship, anxious that he might scare Luffy by mistake. Even though the boy had been nothing but curious and enthusiastic. Zoro was stationed on watch, and the sounds of increasingly heavy weights being lifted at an ever-quickening pace made it clear that he'd prefer if the others steered clear. Sanji was making second breakfast and early lunch, grumbling about how everyone's internal clock was going to be out of whack for days because of the extra early meal. It's a bit surreal, isn't it? Nami muses, fingering the tattered brim of the straw hat. Luffy, without any memories of Shanks, had commented that the hat was cool, but wasn't his when Nami had offered it to him. Yesterday he was excited because we were going to an island with a shaky needle. Now he's excited because he's learning how to mop. Hey now, don't argue with easy to please, Usopp joked, shooting Luffy a thumbs up when the boy turned to see if he was watching. I'm not arguing, it's just strange. That little kid over there beat up two Shichibukai and had fun doing it, now he has no idea what a gum-gum pistol is. Not to mention, who just ups and shrinks out of the blue. We have such a volatile captain, Usopp snickers and reaches out for the hat, Nami hands it to him. But really, he's not that different. Yeah, he's in Chopper's clothes, and yeah, he doesn't run around yelling he's going to be the Pirate King, and yeah, he's forgotten he even has a hat. He glanced up from playing with the red hat ribbon. Nami had her eyebrows raised. Okay, so he's different. But really, watch this. He hands the hat back to Nami and watches Luffy fondly for a second. He's given up on actually mopping and is instead practicing mock sword exercises with his mop handle, acting as a practice sword. Hey Luffy. The boy freezes, the mop handle brandished in front of him, probably embedded in some imaginary enemy's gut. The guilt on his face looks crushing, and it makes Nami laugh at how little it takes to upset the child when her captain usually wouldn't bat an eye at the situation. Working hard over there. Usopp smirks and the boy lets a wobbly smile spreads over his lips. He lowers the mop handle and actually moves it so it's a little behind his back, as though trying to hide the evidence. Yeah. I'm mopping really hard, not pretending to fight enemy pirates at all. He purses his lips and ducks his head. Oh, don't be mean. Nami lightly slaps Usopp's arm and then grins at Luffy. You're doing a great job, Luffy, she assures him, and Luffy beams nervously. The deck is sparkling. Neither of them miss the relief that passes behind Luffy's eyes before he brings the mop out again and pushes it back and forth a few times, clearly for show. See, not that different. Usopp leans back over the railing, stretching his back out till he feels it pop. You're fooling yourself, Nami argues. He might have some similarities, but you and I both know that he's an extremely different person, just maybe not on a fundamental level. Luffy can't lie. She holds up a finger. That's rule number 1 in the How to Live with Luffy handbook. Speaking of which, rule 2, he gets bored fast. What do you suggest for when he stops mopping? Or pretending to mop? Luffy may have maintained the charade for a few moments after his brush with Discovery, but he's switched back into mock fighting now, but they leave him to it. We'll give him a new job, watering the grass or something, Usopp shrugs. Not all of the jobs they tried were good fits, like Luffy helping Sanji wash dishes, or Luffy watering his pop greens, which were slightly carnivorous, but that wasn't a problem for him, only for a small boy who was just the right size to be an appetizer, or, for a short time, Luffy doodling maps of his home village with Nami's help. Nami flicks Usopp's nose irritably. He'll make the whole deck a marsh. You can have him do that, but only if you take the heat when Frankie finds out. She crosses her arms and he gapes at her. What? But you're the one with a bodyguard. Honestly, Nami never took advantage of her gender, okay, lie. But she only used certain advantages, she could do almost anything she wanted and she'd never have to worry about it because of Sanji. Nami ignored him, turning back to their charge and tapping her chin thoughtfully. He's a kid, right? What about a game? It's not like he would sit still long enough to play cards or something. Oh. How about hide and seek? Usopp smirks until Nami brings a fist down on his head. No. Don't let him out of your sight. Luffy's begun to hum a happy song that sounds a bit like a morphed version of Bink's Ache, morphed as in there's a number of notes in all the wrong spots, and is happily swinging the mop around the deck, shifting into a dance that carries him over the slippery boards as he stumbles about with his clumsy partner. He's content until he's interrupted. Pain pierces directly beneath his eye, he feels the blood slide over his skin, and he shouts with the abrupt charge that shocks through him. He drops the mop, his hands flying to his eye, the skin there is dry, no blood, but it stings, burns, the skin is marred, smoother than it should be. Usopp and Nami both straighten, snapping towards the cry, and in just a second Usopp is crossing towards his captain. You alright? He asks, and when Luffy shakes his head, Nami is across the deck in a few steps, Usopp kneeling down and turning the boy to look at him. What happened? My eye hurts, Luffy sniffles, and the tears begin to bud in the eye they can see. Let me see. Nami kneels down to his height and pulls his hands away from his face. She gasps. While Luffy sniffles, she traces a feather-light fingertip along the curve of the scar beneath his right eye. The skin is shiny and new, bright red with 2 fresh lines where stitching has recently been removed. How did you get this? She breathes, tracing it again while Usopp yelps at the sight of the new wound. Luffy shakes his head and Nami pulls her hand back. I don't know, it hurts. His eyes well up full, and Nami hastily swipes her thumbs across the pooling tears. Don't do that. The salt will sting if it gets on there, she scolds, and Luffy begins to chew on his lower lip, shaking, as though holding his breath will make the tears stop flowing. Nami sighs and looks up at Usopp, questions flitting across the space between the two. He cringes and waves his hands, she closes her eyes and shakes her head, turning back to Luffy. She should have known better than to turn to Usopp for answers. We should put a band-aid on that, come here. Luffy held up his arms, and she hoisted him up from under his armpits. He wraps his legs around her torso and settles his head on her shoulder. He sniffles again before pulling away, looking at his hand. Luffy? Nami prompts, he ignores her, instead reaching out and pulling on his hand, as if his wrist might come out of its joint. It's stretched. Tears, salt water, blood. He's wet with it all, clutching at the fabric of the shirt, wringing it out with his fists, even as it soaked with the next wave. The noise, just his screams and Shanks' reassurances, lies, and waves. The waves are deafening. He goes under, blood mingles with salt, it's coppery salty water, he spits it out. It's alright, Anchor, it's just an arm. It's not, it's Shanks' arm, it's special and important, and it's gone because of him. Wave over his head, Shanks curses into his hair as he's pressed close, and blood drips onto his ear as he's clutched closer still. Water, silence, the swirl of the water around him, he surfaces. It's gone. In an instant it's gone, all of it. Everything. He screams. No more water, no more blood. He can't feel the waves, can't hear Shanks, he's not wet, his arms are wrapped tightly around someone else, not clenched in fabric. He's being shaken, carried, someone is running, bouncing him gently. It's all gone, except for the tears and reassurances. Calm down, it's just a scar. We're taking you to Chopper, he'll make it stop stinging. Don't worry, rubber is cool. Don't cry, Luffy. I've got this nice cream that'll help. Please, Luffy, that hurts. His eyes fly open, it's gone, it's absolutely all gone. Shanks. He cries, he lets go, his body snaps back together, and he falls onto wood, onto a floor. It's a tumble and a crawl and a leap, the step back, into her leg. She's tall, and not Makino, not Shanks. Who? Whoa. Hey, nothing's wrong. He spins, the man is towering, his arms reaching, grabbing. Everything's wrong. Where's Shanks? Where's he? He stumbles and falls to the side, something catches him, his size. He yells as the fur wraps around him, it's soft, it's not Shanks. No. He screams and he pushes away, the fur goes away, he stumbles, he crawls. The wall gives, a tumble, into a new place. Long. A hall. Not the ocean, where's the sea monster? Where's Shanks? Did he die? Is his arm really gone? Luffy? Hey, look at me, come here. The hand is around his, grasping, he spins and spits. Let go of me. Shanks. Shanks, where? He slides his hand free, the grip had gone lax, he runs. No. No. Yusuf chatters and stumbles down the hall, reaching for the boy as he careens down the hall. He's screaming gibberish and is obviously confused and scared. This isn't Luffy, not at all. What the heck? Sanji yells as the kitchen door blows open with the force of Luffy's push against it. Luffy. Yusuf pushes in after him, Chopper ducking under the man's legs. Catch him. Sanji leaps over the counter and lunges for the boy, wrapping his arms around the boy, who immediately begins to flail, screaming bloody murder. No, Shanks. Where? Sanji pins his arms and hugs him close in a tight hold, even as he digs his feet into his stomach looking for purchase. Luffy, look at me. He demands and is surprised when the boy complies. He strains his neck, bending almost in half to look up, and Sanji bites through his cigarette. He sees the picture of panic, eyes blown wide, tears turning his cheeks shiny. Little choked sobs are making the boy gasp and buck, even as he whips his head around, accidentally getting snot all over Sanji's suit. Sanji-kun, you got him. Nami blows in like a frantic gale and Luffy whimpers, struggling as they all gather close. Go away. Let me go. Where? His eyes shift frantically from person to person, stalling on Nami and then spinning back around to stare at Yusuf. Luffy, you're upsetting Nami-san. Stop yelling. Sanji commands and again to his surprise the boy seals his lips shut, the sobs buried into a hitch of his breath deep within his chest. Good, now I'm going to set you down, stay still. He bends down and sets Luffy on his feet where he wobbles for a moment before bolting to the left. Yusuf snatches him up. Wow. He fumbles as the boy flails again, crying loudly again. Geez, you're strong already. Nuo. I don't want to be here. Stupid bandits. Chopper yelps as Luffy's leg stretches in a kick a little too close for comfort. We're not bandits. Stop lying, you stole me. Give me back, I want to go home. Luffy keens and Sanji throws his hands over his ears. Luffy. Listen to me. We didn't take you. You're safe here. Safe. Nami ducks into the chaos and catches Luffy's hand, completely capturing it within her own. No way, Luffy whips his head to face her, his voice wobbles with fear and emotion and contempt. Shanks would never let me go, you hurt him, worse than I did. You must have. The words sound more desperate and reproachful than actually accusing. Ah, no. We're good friends of Shanks. Yusuf spouts and Luffy howls. No. You're not. If you were you'd be with him and not with me. Luffy pulls free and rolls over the floor, scuttling to a corner where he curls up, hugging his knees. He moans and rubs his face over his kneecaps blubbering gibberish. Nami moves forward, but Sanji pulls her back. Nami-sen, I think we should leave him be for now. We're only causing more anguish by crowding him. She nods and steps back again, Chopper reaching forward and hugging her leg. Sanji looks at the three of them, Nami close to tears, Yusuf lingering nervously to the side and fingering the straps of his suspenders, Chopper sniffling at Nami's feet, all six eyes trained on Luffy, who's gone silent but remains a shivering ball of misery, back shaking with contained cries. Outside in the hall a long note draws itself from the strings of a violin, turning sharp at the very end of its life before falling into the gentle rise and fall of a melody. He steps around the counter, back into the kitchen, picks up the plate of sandwiches he put together for lunch and sets on the table, nudging Yusuf as he passes before taking Nami's arms and leading her to a chair. The sniper flinches and takes a seat himself, robotically picking up a sandwich and putting it in his mouth, chewing slowly as he stares into space, slow and thoughtful. Nami mumbles a soft thank you and drops into the chair like she's going to bed, tired and worn out by a day that started at 3 o'clock and is only just getting to its climax, or maybe it will last longer still. Who knows anymore? Sanji lights a new cigarette before picking up his chopping knife and putting a new carrot on the cutting board, the nicotine stills the shake in his hands. He looks down at the carrot, switches it with a tomato, the first slice sends red juice spurting across the counter. What is probably 15 minutes is comparable to an hour. To people of action like the Straw Hats, waiting isn't usually the best choice. There's always a clock ticking somewhere, and the sound of it in their ears is enough to make their heads ring with the loss of each second. The ring is drowned out by the sounds of Luffy uncurling. Topper squeaks and Nami turns immediately. Yusuf squeezes his sandwich, like it isn't already dented with his fingerprints on the soft bread. The child in the corner swipes a hand across his face and looks away from them, using the wall for support. He stands, a slow, shuddering process that leaves Chopper wanting to go help him up. Hi, I'm LL Luffy, he says to the wall before tensing and turning around, his lips spread and his eyes squeezed shut. A giggle rises in his throat as he shakes with holding and breaths heavy with tears, but it looks like mirth. Nami feels her heart stop. The smile is wide as ever, the laugh seemingly effortless. His face is stained red with emotion as a few final tears drip off his chin, but the smile, the laugh, everything but the stutter. Normal Luffy. I wasn't too nice before, sorry. You guys are weird, so it scared me. He steps away from the wall, and the way he walks fumbles and a stumble only once. He's bouncy and bounding, pulling himself up into the chair next to Usopp and reaching for a sandwich. Sanji rolls his cigarette between his teeth, a headache building between his eyes. Chopper is staring wide-eyed, paralyzed. Usopp shakes himself out of it first. What the heck, Luffy? He sizes the boy's wrist, and the smile wobbles for a second as the sandwich falls from his hand. You think we didn't see that? What are you doing? What's wrong? They all watch as his eyes dart again. They linger between them and on them, like there's something there that isn't. And nothing. Nothing's wrong at all. A lie. It's the first time he could have fooled them, any of them. If they'd not seen his breakdown, if they'd not been stared at with the utmost fury and fear, they'd think it was the truth. It's a well-made mask that he's wrapped around himself. You guys just scared me. I dunno where I am and I dunno who you are, so I got scared. You're nice though, so nothing's wrong. He giggles, and Nami sets her sandwich down, feeling queasy. That's not true and you know it. She hisses and Luffy twists around to look at her, confused. Luffy, I don't know what happened to upset you, but this is wrong. You can tell that there is something really wrong about all of this, can't you? No, Luffy, listen to yourself. What happened? You can tell us, you can trust us. He sucks in his smile, chews on his lip, shakes his head. No, I can't. Trust us or tell us. Nami wants to ask, but she doesn't because Luffy's eyes tell her both. Nothing happened. I'm not upset, Luffy. Chopper shakes himself out of his paralysis, almost growling as his eyes tear. It's not healthy to bag up your emotions like this. I'm a doctor, but I can't bandage a wound you keep hidden. I'm not hiding anything. Luffy protests, standing up in his seat. The tremor is back. What are you? You look like an animal, but you talk. The tremor, he pretends it's excitement, like anger and sadness isn't rattling around in his head. That's not important, Usopp snaps. You're lying. That's my job. Be Luffy. Tell the truth and get all emotional. Hug us and tell us you want some meat and stop pretending like everything's normal because it's freaky. Everything is normal. Luffy insists, but his voice is strained, his fists clenched, desperate. Nothing is normal. Usopp pushes back his chair and stands up, pointing a finger at his shivering captain. The man I look up to most in the world has been shrunk down to the age of 6 or 7, just spent the better part of 15 minutes crying in a corner, and is now pretending nothing is wrong. And he looks exactly like he always does. He shakes his head frantically, groping at the air with his gesticulation. Luffy shifts on his feet, shrinking away from Usopp as he yells. He winces as Usopp lunges forward and forces Luffy to look at him. Usopp's voice is almost a warble, pleading, watching Luffy's brown eyes water and focus on his own. What the heck do you think you're doing? You think it's funny? It's scary, Luffy. What are we supposed to think now when you smile like that? Usopp. Nami breathes and Sanji leans against the counter. The music outside has fallen so quiet that it is no longer there. I can't. Luffy whispers quietly. I have to be brave. Shank saved me from the bandits, he says I'm a man now, I shouldn't cry. Jai-chan says that strong marines don't cry. I'll be a super strong pirate one day, and I'll need to be strong for my crew too. I can't be a weak captain. He sucks in a sniffle, straightens. So it's okay. The smile that had slowly broken and fallen out of place is taped back together, placed lightly back into position. I can be strong and keep getting stronger. I don't need time to cry. I'll just make sure it never happens again. I'm alright. He grins again. The effort is evident. And nothing's wrong. He looks so proud of himself, with the tears pounding against the back of his eyes, and his fists shaking as he clenches them at his sides. Usopp falls back into his chair, looking like Enel just shocked him with a few hundred volts of electricity. You're joking, he whispers, and Sanji drops his cigarette to the floor, stamping down on it and twisting his heel till the ashes are mixed equally with the wood. You're an idiot. He spits, venomous. We all knew you were stupid, but you're an absolute idiot. Luffy looks confused and is about to defend himself, but Nami interrupts him. Everyone's allowed to cry, Luffy. She chokes out. You think you have to be strong like that for us? Chopper whispers. Have you always? It doesn't have anything to do with you. Luffy shakes his head, pauses. Who are you even? Cause I actually do want to know where Shanks is. Cause he stops short and readjusts his smile. Cause nothing. Enough of that, Luffy. Cause what? Nami demands, and Chopper nods determinedly beside her. Usopp's shaking. You guys are annoying. He huffs and crosses his arms. Don't you? Nami stands up, her fist impending. Luffy, you're going to sit there and tell us a sob story, or I'm going to make you cry myself. Nami-san is so determined. Sanji coos and Usopp glares at him. You're mean. Luffy yells, pouting. I don't care. You're delusional. Everyone cries. You'll hurt yourself if you don't. It's the body's way to release stress and emotion. Chopper butts in, angry. if you've been doing this since you were 6. I'm 7. Luffy protests indignantly. 7? Then no wonder your blood pressure is so high. What's blood pressure? It's bad. Stress increases it, and it's proven to increase your chance of death. Chopper stamps a hoof. Wah, really? Usopp wails. He gets into enough trouble already, he doesn't need to increase his chances. Stop talking about me like I'm not here. I hate it when people do that. Chopper delves into a detailed medical spiel full of foreign words and jargon of the trade, leaving Luffy blinking rapidly as each sentence ends, his brain reeling anew. Listen to Chopper, tell us what's wrong. Nami shook his hand angrily before he pulled his hand away. His head had begun to swivel between the 4 of them as they each plead with him to tell them what was wrong. Don't be stupid. Increased heart rate, which pumps blood at an unbelievable speed through the veins, which builds up pressure against. How long have you been hiding stuff like this? Tell us what's wrong. No. He yells, breaks into quiet cries as he cements his hands to cover his ears. Stop. I don't want to talk about it. Not Shanks, not bandits or sea monsters, and not how scared I am. Usopp and Nami exchange guilty looks, and Chopper shuts his jaw with an audible click, severing the stream of words. Only Sanji looks unabashed. You understand, don't you? He pulls out a chair, sets himself down in it like he hadn't a care in the world, busying his hands with his lighter, offering it to a once more teary Luffy who sniffles and snatches the shiny thing, playing with the embossed silver and gold ridging. That it's okay to be scared, okay to cry. No, it's not, I'm a man. So you're saying I'm not? Sanji barks a laugh and frowns down at the child who has shrunk slightly, thinking he'd offended him. His hand still, his fingers paused in their running over the spark switch. I'm a man, Luffy, but that doesn't mean I don't cry. Listen, he takes the lighter back. No one is not allowed to be scared, everyone is allowed to cry. The only time that stuff is a problem is if you don't get over it. Luffy looks up slowly, staring into Sanji's stoic face. He nods. That's good. Cause I'm not very good at not crying. The tears are falling before he's done, and Chopper sags with relief against Usopp, who pats his head in condolence. I didn't mean anything by it. Luffy whimpers, I just wanted to help Shanks. I never thought any of it would happen like it did. And he tells them all about it. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support the Wordlet for writing that awesome fanfic. See you in the next video. Goodbye.